𝐲𝐻𝐬's eyes darkened instantly. Like an ink spool in water, it rippled black. 𝐲𝐻𝐬, I whispered, wincing. His jaw snapped, teeth clashing together as he forced himself to be quiet. 46 PLS Rev 45 before this. Despite 𝐲𝐻𝐬's unwelcome invasion into my bedroom, I felt my shoulders relax, knowing that it was only him. How strange. I thought. The man who claims to not want me here is the one to soothe my mind. Are you okay? He wondered, coming closer to me. I swallowed, nodding but taking a step back. Yes, he frowned, his nostrils flaring as he studied me. I shook my head, walking away from him to go into my bathroom and take the bathrobe from the back of the door. Sliding it on, I avoided direct eye contact as I tied the belt around my waist. Entering my room again, I sat on the bed, sighing as I faced him. What do you want now? I mumbled. 𝐲𝐻𝐬's eyebrows furrowed before he cleared his throat. I leveled my gaze with his, my face passive despite the war going on inside my mind. He was frowning, his eyes darting all over my face as his Adam's apple bobbed in his throat. Nostrils flaring again, he walked a few steps closer. Why does it smell like vomit in here? He asked. I vomited. I shrugged. Why are you unwell? He scowled, standing before me. In the head. I mused. No, I just didn't feel very well. He shifted, nodding against the tension in the air. I swallowed, staring down at my feet as the silence dragged on. Eventually he sighed, his hand coming to grab at my chin. I jumped at the contact, rearing my head away from where his fingers touched the soreness of Blake's touch. Ezra paused, his fingers brushing against my skin. Did I hurt you? Gritting my teeth, I shook my head and remained silent. His fingers moved, caressing my cheek and jaw softly. I felt my shoulders relax under the gentle buzzing of his energy. But when his fingers firmly pressed into my lower jaw, a small gasp of surprise escaped me. 𝐲𝐻𝐬's grip moved away from the obviously sore area, tightening elsewhere on my chin so I couldn't pull away. I narrowed my eyes up at him, finding his eyes dark and ablaze with anger. You are bruising, he stated. I said nothing. Who did this to you? He growled, dropping my gaze. The silence endured. It seemed to irritate him more because he let go of me with a low growl. Damn it. 𝐴𝐿𝐬, who hurt you? Who didn't? I mentally snarled. Nobody. So, you just fall and bruise your jaw. He scoffed. I stiffened. The tone of his voice was giving me memories of Darius. The disappointed tone and belittling snap of words signified he knew I was lying. That usually meant something else was coming after. I wrapped my arms around myself, habitually protecting my vital organs. I'm sorry, I mumbled. It was quiet for 6 seconds before he let out a long sigh. I felt the bed dip beside me and my breath hitched with the proximity of his body. He leaned over his knees, hands clasped in the middle, as he glared at the floor. No, no. You don't have to be sorry, he murmured. I blinked, taken aback. This time, I was speechless for an entirely different reason. Not stubbornness, but shock. I have been trying to avoid you as of late, but I keep finding myself coming back. He chuckled darkly. I tried all damn day today. After what happened in the shower, I have just been unable to stay away. I'm on edge. Your emotions have been a whirlwind as of late, and half the time I think they are just false. I blinked slowly, mesmerized by his voice. I think this is the most he has spoken to me since we met. Please. He breathed, glancing up to capture my eyes. I know there is something holding you back from letting me into your past. But do not keep away the present when it can affect your future. My heart fluttered. The deep blue of his eyes so mesmerizing I found my breath taken away. He sounded so sincere, so heartfelt, and almost pleading for me to speak up. But Blake was a large man, even taller than 𝐲𝐲𝐬, a powerful alpha male who could easily get pissed if I spilled my guts. Again, swallowing down the lump in my throat, I spoke. My emotions, he sighed, dropping his eyes back to the floor. I nervously grabbed at the fabric of my bathrobe, wondering why he was being so softly spoken tonight. You have had a lot of them lately. The more I seem to let you into my mind, my life, the more I feel them. He exhaled loudly. It's rather distracting, especially when I feel fear or anxiety. I tried to block it out, but here I am. I licked my lips. A nervous habit? My hands moved to settle on my knees, fingers drumming against my kneecap. What does this even mean? I whispered. His hand came to clutch mine, stopping the incessant thumping of my fingers. I don't know. Right now, I don't know what is going on with my beast. Your beast, I repeated, looking up at him. Inhaling, he straightened his back. We are one. You know that. Not two separate entities, but one whole. My wild side has been aching to be free. Usually, I am free, with simple control, but lately it has been rather difficult to set aside my instincts. I want nothing more than to be home. Because of me. I wondered. He paused for a second, but nodded. Yes, my mind and body are at a war. Oh, I muttered. I see. That's the thing you don't see. I don't see. Nobody does. He laughed darkly. I did not even want another damn human in my pack. Yet here I am. I flinched, dropping my eyes from the side of his face to glare down at my lap. I couldn't help being born a human, not like I could change it. He was being rude. I know. He groaned, and I realized I had said that out loud. Silence sticked by with the beating of my heart. I slowly saw him relax from the corner of my eye, his shoulders slumping as he breathed slower. How did you hurt your jaw? He asked again. I hesitated, debating on whether to tell him. Was it worth any repercussions from Blake? Would there even be any? Okay, he grumbled. Different question. Did one of my pack members hurt you? No, I muttered. Good. He huffed. Did someone not from my pack hurt you? I swallowed, lifting my head to gaze into the night skies of his eyes. They were full of barely concealed anger, creased at the corners as he scrutinized me. My heart raced in my chest, his head cocking as he scanned my features. I was nervous, at a crossroads with which way to go down. Both males were temperamental, and I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do. If I yelled, would the repercussions be worse? No, I whispered. Ezra nodded mutely, his head snapping away to glare ahead of him. He ran a hand through his hair before jumping up to his feet. Within seconds, he was at my door and throwing it open. I jumped in surprise when Blake stood at the other side of it, his hand raised to knock. What are you doing here? 𝐲𝐲𝐬 snapped. Blake's eyes widened, darting to me in the distance. His eyes soon narrowed, trying to hide his surprise at the other alpha before him. How did 𝐲𝐲𝐬 know he was there? A gross shiver ran along my body, 𝐾𝐞𝐲𝐵 rising beneath the robe I wore when I saw Blake's dark eyes scrutinize me. Well, 𝐲𝐲𝐬 snapped. I came to look for you. Blake stammered. I wanted to speak to you about some documents. Lies, I thought. I could taste his lie on my tongue. The way it made my back crawl with disgust and body convulse with discomfort. He came here for me, I knew he did. Fear wrenched in my stomach when his dark eyes flickered to mine again. The ghost of his fingers along my hair and jaw had me tensing the muscle. Ezra growled suddenly, causing Blake to take a step back and raise his hands in defense. I looked at my mate when he stepped in front of the imposing male, blocking the view. "I will discuss it in my office. Be there in 5 minutes." Ezra snarled before slamming the door shut. I jumped at the loud noise, frowning when a slight crack broke the render above my door frame. Ezra didn't seem to notice, stalking towards me so quickly that my stomach lurched into my throat. He leaned over me, his hand moving to grab me by the throat. He carefully avoided the sore area, his fingers flexing around the tenderness of my neck. My heart raced, my eyes widening at the position he held me in. He studied me quietly, nose twitching, eyes flickering between dark and light as he fought his own mind. I felt vulnerable under his gaze, frozen in place as he held me by my neck, forcing me to look up at him. He could snap my spine without effort. I was submissive under his hold. "Asra?" I whispered. He closed his eyes, inhaling loudly before slowly exhaling. His chest rose and fell with the effort, and I found my eyes watching as the muscles in his biceps twitched. He dropped me, my head slumping back to stare at the ground instead. I swallowed thickly as he glanced towards the door, glaring so hard into the wood I feared it may catch fire. "I have an alpha to attend to," he growled. My fear skyrocketed so much that I was sure he would hear the rapid beating of my heart. What did he mean by that? Would he question Blake? Would Blake come to me demanding answers? "Do not fret," he mumbled, and I blinked back into the present to find him crouched before me. "I will sort this out." His hands moved to squeeze mine, the rough callus a large contrast to the smoothness of my own. His blue eyes softened, gazing up at me with slight determination. I wished I could see what was going on in his mind, to find out what he was thinking in this moment. He could feel my emotions. It was unfair I could not feel his. "Go to sleep," he mumbled. "You will be safe." Although they were nothing but measly words, I felt the promise hidden beneath them. I nodded gently, and he forced a smile before standing to his full height. He turned to leave my room, glancing back at me before he entered the hallway and shut the door. I stayed sat upright for a moment longer, trying to figure out what on earth was going on. Blake had come for me, just like he said he would. I hoped he could not hear what was spoken. If his reaction to Asra inside my room was enough evidence, I assumed he could not. My mate's mood swings forever confused me. It felt like I could never quite grasp what was going on in his mind. First, I was a thorn in his side. Then he was demanding I didn't showcase my body, to him now not wanting another human around. It was almost like he was at war with himself, his body and mind. I sighed, falling into my bed and staring up at the ceiling. Despite Blake's threat, my body felt relaxed. I knew somehow that Asra was right and I would be safe. It was enough to send my mind into slumber, my brain exhausted from too much stimulation. Darkness invaded my brain as I fell asleep, but at one point a gentle brush of fabric along my skin alerted my half-asleep brain. I felt my body move, and I groaned and curled up into a ball in result. The heavy weight of the blanket came over me and my hands reached out to grab it. A small grumble of protest leaving my lips as I fought to go back to sleep. I swore I heard a faint chuckle, but my mind was already too foggy, and sleep-deprived to pay any attention. 47, why were they in my room? Who even said they could sleep in my room? With my hands on my hips, I glared down at the suspect, my eyes narrow and lips pursed with distaste. He moved upon hearing me huff, a small grumble of awareness escaping his throat. Peeking one of his blue eyes open, he rolled over onto his back, I had a hard time not dropping my gaze to stare at his barely clad body, I have to admit. "Good morning," he rasped. Goosebumps rose on my arms as his morning voice caressed my ears, and I suppressed the shiver as it tried to roll down my spine. Blue clashed with blue as he raised himself up onto his elbows in alarm. I staggered back a step at the sudden urgency when he shot up from my bed and grabbed my shoulders in his hands. I winced when his fingers prodded at my jaw, sharp twinges of pain shooting along my skin. "𝐲𝐲, he growled. "Stays." My lips parted in protest when he tilted my head, my eyes falling to the ceiling. "Tulip," he breathed, pulling my face back to him. I swallowed at the warning held in his eyes, my heart racing with fear. His touch was gentle, but his face was stern. I was afraid I may have offended him, yes. I whispered, "Who did this to your jaw?" He asked. I felt my throat constrict, my adrenaline rising as my panic settled in. I couldn't tell him. There would be repercussions for my actions. There always was. Blake will know I'd owled on him, and it will come back to bite me in the ass. "Tulip, I will not ask you again," 𝐲𝐲 warned. "I can't," I whimpered. His eyes blazed, his fingers flexing on my jaw before they moved to cradle my shoulders. "Tulip, you need to tell me." I shook my head, keeping my lips firmly shut. I just wanted to run, to go into the bathroom and pretend nothing was happening. "If you tell me, I won't do anything," he spoke calmly. He was trying to appear cool and collected, but I could see the fire in his eyes. The beast eager for a hunt. He was taunting me, edging me on to fall for his trap. "Okay, if you won't tell me, I will just find out myself," he grunted. I gasped with surprise, my hands reaching out to grab him just as he let go of me to pass by. He stopped at the contact, his eyes dropping to where my skin touched his bare arm. Dark eyes flashed up at me, and within a second, he pressed me against the wall. My robe fell free, and I scrambled to pull it back around my body. His arms caged me in, biceps brushing against my cheeks as I tried to catch myself. He was inches away from me, his breath fanning my nose as he tried to keep the growling to a minimum. "Did Blake do this to you? Is this why you are so afraid?" he breathed, leaning over me. I remained silent, too stunned at the abrupt change of my morning to even comprehend what was going on right now. "Rio spoke to me earlier, saying that he came to see you after having a feeling that you were uncomfortable. As my beta, he reports everything to me," he explained softly, but I winced at the memory of the man in my room. "Did he come to speak with you?" "Yes," I whispered. "Did you lie to him like you are to me?" I swallowed, but the silence that dragged felt heavy. He growled softly, his chest deflating with the movement. I wanted to tell him. I truly did. The energy, the sensations his body alone could give me was enough to tell me that this mate bond was real. If he was my true love, as the fairy tales say, shouldn't I be able to tell him everything? I wanted to confide in him. My body screamed with everything to just trust him and let him in, but the other part of me was scared. Scared that his hot, temperamental character would disable our relationship, that he would be like Darius, or Ash, or even Darius' father, the scary, stern man who always wanted control. I didn't want to be controlled. At war with myself. 𝐲𝐲's eyes stayed locked onto my face. I swallowed the lump in my throat, lifting my gaze to meet his eyes. They seemed to soften the grimace lifting until his expression appeared passive. My heart warmed at the connection, the weight of it in my chest. It captivated me, entrapped and unable to escape. So, when he asked me again, his voice as soft as a gentle breeze, I sealed my fate. "Did Blake do this to you?" "Yes," I breathed, His eyes darkened instantly, like an ink spool in water. It rippled black. The corner of his eyes creased along with the harsh curve of his lips and forehead. His body shook slightly, first sprouting on his arms. I flinched with alarm when he growled, his canines glinting back at me in the bright sun of the room. "Ezra," I whispered, wincing. His jaw snapped, teeth clashing together as he forced himself to be quiet. "What did he do?" He spat through gritted teeth. My eyes fell from his face, my hands shaking as I fumbled for words, staring down at my feet. I chewed on my tongue as I fought with myself. It surprised me when the gentle touch of his fingers lifted my face up, curling along the tip of my chin. "Don't look away when you speak to me," he murmured. My breath hitched as I raised my gaze back to his barely concealed emotions. He was calmer. I saw the beast within, saw its itch to break free. "What did he do to you?" Entrapped by his presence? I forced myself to answer before I chickened out. "He cornered me in the elevator." "And he urged?" His chest rumbling. "Said that I smelled good and asked me to." I swallowed, looking at the tense look in his eyes. "Entertain him." But I said no. "And that is why he hurt you?" "Yes," I breathed. "He grabbed me and told me he was my superior. Being a wolf." He was barely concealing his rage now, his eyes blazing as he glared at me. I could see the fur sprouting from his skin, his limbs shaking as he forced his beast away. "There is something else," he stated. "I can sense it." "Nothing else." I shook my head. His heated gaze wouldn't let me lie, and I racked my brain for the underlying answer he wanted. I felt sweat beating on my skin, my heart beating heavily in my chest, my stomach swirled with nerves, my mouth filling with saliva as the tension grew. "He told me to be a good whore and not tell anyone." I muttered. It must have worked, because he grunted and pushed his weight from the wall. He began pacing, his shoulders shaking as he appeared deep in thought. I stayed where I was against the wall, deciding staying still to calm my breathing was the best option. "I'm sorry," he spluttered, going to my door. I shouted his name desperately, fear overtaking me once more as the thought of my consequences filled my brain. He told me to be quiet, and now I had broken the secret. Tears pricked at my eyes, my heart clenching with agony. Asra's eyes softened. "I cannot take this lightly. Not only did he threaten my mate, but my pack member. There is nothing I can do whilst he is on my land because of pack laws. But rest assured, he will get his reward once he is back home." A small whimper of fright escaped me when he pulled my door open. It was enough to have him hesitate, his fingers gripping the wood hard. I could see the dark tendrils of his wolf's fur now, the way his back was arching and eager to shift. He struggled to speak. "No harm will come to you, I promise." Then he was gone. Nothing but the gentle click of my door as he shifted into his wolf and fled from my room. The silence was ominous, a loud contrast to the rapid beating of my heart for the past 10 minutes. Everything had escalated so fast. Did I regret telling him everything? Yes. But did I feel relieved by telling him? Also, yes, was I terrified? Out of my mind. Double yes. But did I somehow feel safer? Like a weight had been lifted. I did. I was a little proud of myself for being able to tell someone. There was just something about Asra, much like Piper, that made me want to indulge them in my every secret. But even some of those secrets were too deeply cut to come out of their hiding spot, covered with layers upon layers of skin and unable to escape into the bright of day. I just hoped that Asra was a man of his word. I spent the rest of the day cooped up in my room. I got dressed in some pajamas and refused to leave my room. I had worn knockers away, telling them I wanted privacy. Ezra had not come back since, and I did not know where he went or what he was doing. It took some time before Piper came banging on my door. Maya and Eve's attempts earlier were in vain. I knew when Piper came, I would have no choice. She was like my older sister, and the longer I stayed in here alone, the more I longed for someone's company. Piper banged loudly, her voice disgruntled. 𝐿𝐲𝐬, you let me in right this instant before I break your damn door down. I'd locked my door from the inside, so she wouldn't be able to get in. Plus, they had reassured me it was near impossible to break it when I moved in. Sighing, my feet patted onto the carpet as I made my way to the door. She did not stop knocking, the incessant sound hurting my head the closer I got to her. I was hungry and thirsty, the bathroom tap water just not cutting it in terms of satisfaction. Pulling the door open, Piper stumbled forward a step and shot me a hard glare. "What the fuck are you doing in here again?" she shrieked. I stepped aside to let her barge past, and she immediately threw her hands on her hips as she took in my room. It was still fairly tidy. I had spent most of my time by the window, staring at the trees and hoping to spot 𝐲𝐲. Despite his warning that he could do nothing, I couldn't help but worry that something was going on. 𝐿𝐲𝐬? I hummed, snapping out of my thoughts to close the door. Turning to her, I rubbed my hands together, happy to see her initial annoyance had dissipated. "Yes." "What happened?" she asked. I cocked my head, studying her. She had worry lines on her forehead, and her usually smooth ponytail had too many loose tendrils. I knew straight away she had been running her hand through it, many times the strands falling free from her hair tie. Ezra found out. "Okay. I need more context." She pursed her lips. "What did he find out?" "About Blake." As if remembering, her eyes dropped to my jaw, her mouth curling instantly into a growl. I flinched a little, unnerved by the sight of her canines. She licked her lips at my reaction, forcing the teeth back into their place. "Sorry," she huffed. "It's really black." I nodded. "I know." I had already stared at it deeply in the shower once 𝐲𝐲𝐬 left. It was nothing new to me. A bruised jaw and neck were a staple Darius' move. I easily covered it with a scarf or high collar, sometimes even hair. He loved to grab and force me down by the back of my neck, leaving me unable to escape as he decided what to do with me. Or grab me by the biceps, the soft flesh there bruised easily. He had later revealed to me he loved how soft my skin was to bruise, but my jaw was his favorite control point. An icy shiver ran over me, my eyes closing briefly, only to open and see Piper right before me. She tilted my head much like 𝐲𝐲𝐬 did, but I didn't feel the same butterflies in her proximity. Her scent was soft, a gentle flowery perfume that didn't irritate my nose. Piper always smelt and looked clean. Which brings me back to the hair. What's happened? Her eyes flickered from my neck to my eyes before going back again. 𝐲𝐲𝐬 shifted in the house. I swallowed, nodding, and then he went on a run and killed some trees. A herd of deer taken down. She shrugged, dropping her hand away. Then he came back in human form, covered in blood. Trackers had followed him at a safe distance, but they didn't catch everything. If you told him about Blake, this would make sense as to the outburst. I nodded, my nose twitching as I fought back the urge to sniffle. "Why are you in here alone?" she asked. "Have you eaten?" I thought he was going to kill Blake or tell him what he knows. I whispered. I was terrified he would come after me, so I stayed in my room. She nodded, lips pursing again. "Well, let me assure you, 𝐲𝐿 cannot harm a visiting Continental Alpha. There are pack laws. He has to take discrepancies to the council or wait until he has left and declares war. If he doesn't wait, our pack could be in danger. My eyes bulged. A threat like this against an alpha's mate. Definitely worth a war. She nodded. No wars. Wars mean death. I shook my head, my hands shaking. She grabbed onto me, rubbing her palms over my arms. Don't worry about it. Nothing has happened. Dinner is soon. 𝐲𝐿 may turn up. Don't you want to see he is okay for yourself? Your nerves are fried. I swallowed the buildup of saliva in my throat, my stomach aching with protest. I wanted to see she was right. I didn't want to seem clingy. Her eyes hated when I doted on him like this. Okay? I nodded. She grinned, nodding once. Great. Now go get into some better clothes. You cannot wear pajamas to dinner. 48. 𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐬 read 47 first. Lately, my days felt like they were all blurred together. Like every day was the same and nothing ever changed. As I pulled on a simple dress to go down for dinner, it felt like I had done this more than any normal person has before. Entering the elevator, Piper gave me words of encouragement and reassurance. I know she meant well, but I wouldn't listen to her until I saw 𝐲𝐿 for myself. The door opening distracted Piper from her attempt at soothing, and we walked towards the dining room together. Since there was still a pack guest, we still had a set meal as a pack. We were fairly early at arriving, and 𝐿𝐢𝐬𝐬 and �𝐸 soon ambushed me as they worriedly asked me questions, speaking over each other. I had no ability to understand what they were saying. Lifting my hand, I placed it on 𝐿𝐢𝐬𝐬's mouth before giving her a pointed look and turning to Eve. Eve snorted, crossing her arms at her sibling before looking back at me. Are you okay? I was on my way inside when he barged past me, and he smelt a lot like you. She mumbled. Yes, I'm fine. It was nothing to worry about. I muttered. Eve nodded, her eyes scanning my face, lingering too long on the bruising of my jaw. I had kept my hair down, but I assumed she could still see. 𝐿𝐢𝐬𝐬's eyes were also locked on target, her pupils blown with her beast. I felt her growl against my hand, the faint prick of her canines brushing my skin. I pulled away with a shudder, my arms raising in 𝐿𝐢𝐳𝐬𝐻 as I repressed the fearful reaction. What happened? She snapped. It's nothing. Don't worry about it. I shook my head. She grimaced, her hand coming to move my hair, but I stepped back before she could. Her eyes darted to mine with surprise, but I just gave her a stern smile. It's sore, I mumbled. She nodded once, her lips pursing. Is this why 𝐲𝐿 turned into the Hulk? That who? She blanched, blinking at me with disbelief. The Hulk. Big green comic guy with anger issues. I've not heard of him. Comic books. I shook my head. Movies. Humans made them. We didn't have regular movies in Evermore. She let out a low whistle. Damn. Sounds horrible. Eve snorted. How is not having access to television the worst thing? Maya shot her a look, one that told me they were about to bicker. I took it as my chance to slip away from them when 𝐿𝐢𝐬𝐬's arms raised to her hips with defiance. I found Piper sat in the same spot as before and slid in next to her. Eliza wasn't here yet, but neither was her mate Kayla. Rio was here. His heated gaze from the head of the table burned through my skin. Piper subtly nudged me, pulling my gaze from Rio. I'm sorry, I howled. What? I wondered. She winced. When I left you last night, I know you didn't want to be alone, but Rio called me over. I'm not a part of this pack, so I didn't have to listen to him, but I was concerned for you, and I knew that sending 𝐈𝐲𝐹 to you would not make the relationship any easier. He would go in guns blazing. So I thought about sending 𝐿𝐲. I didn't know 𝐿𝐲 would then tell 𝐈𝐲𝐹 he was concerned. As she spoke, she stared down at her lap. Her fingers played with the cotton of her placemat, every so often casting me a look from the corner of her eye. I sighed, nodding with understanding. If the roles were reversed, and I knew something bad happened to Piper, I would want the threadle eliminated too. It's okay. I get it. I smiled softly, my hand raising to pull hers away. Her eyes darted to me with shock. Are you sure? I broke the unspoken girl code. I laughed softly, shaking my head. I'm sure. If that was you, I would want the same. She squeezed my hand just as the doors opened and the room fell silent. Blake entered first, a grimace on his face as he made his way to the head of the table by 𝐿𝐲. His minions followed behind him, gruffly standing behind their designated chairs. I held my breath as I scanned the trio, finding nothing out of the ordinary other than the foul mood they seemed to emit. The door swung once more and my eyes found 𝐈𝐲𝐹. Entering the room, his hands were fixed on adjusting the cuffs on his long-sleeved shirt. His lips were in a grimace, his hair neatly combed and otherwise untouched. It was suspicious how put together he seemed, and it made me think he had an alternate 𝐾𝐥𝐤 or 𝐊𝐢 hiding somewhere. Standing behind his chair, he cleared his throat. Everyone, this is our last meal with Alpha Blake. He leaves tonight because of a pack emergency. My eyes widened and small murmurs filled the dining room, some even glancing at me and then at my throat. 𝐿𝐲𝐹 stared firmly at the room before his eyes flickered to me. His gaze was a blank, unemotional mask that had me squirming in my seat. I didn't like the weight, the promise of his dull eyes. He was clean, to clean, and it made me suspicious about the secrets he was withholding. With a wave of gesture, 𝐿𝐲𝐹 sat down and everyone else followed. Scraping of chairs fell to the loudness of the room as the chattering picked up in volume. I couldn't pick up on all of it. Being at the head of the table meant they were more reserved in their gossip. A shift in the air beside me alerted me to 𝐿𝐲𝐼𝐻's presence, and I turned to greet her quietly. Hers also flickered down to the bruising, and I tensed as her eyebrows raised in alarm. So, which rumors do I believe? She began. Rumors? I wondered. What are they? Well, one is that you got freaky in the sheets. She winked. My eyes widened with shock. Wait. What? She snorted. I know, right? I said you are not that type of person. Don't worry. If people thought I was already sleeping with their alpha, then I could see why Blake had the same idea. Why couldn't they just use their noses? I thought he said you smell of each other. Can't they just smell we haven't? I groaned. You have smelled of each other quite a lot this past week. Not to mention they saw him leaving your room in the morning. She teased. Damn it. So I guess him sleeping beside me was evidence enough in their eyes. What was the other rumor? I huffed, just as a familiar face set my starter on my placemat. Thank you. Serenity? She nodded once at me, her lips pulled back into a wide grin. Of course. 𝐿𝐲𝐼𝐻. Moving down the line. I watched her work for a moment before 𝐿𝐲𝐼𝐻 cleared her throat. Today was a starter of what smelt like chicken with a dip on the side. I still had yet to talk to 𝐈𝐲𝐹 about their hours. The other rumor. She paused, waiting for me to look at her again. Is that a pack member did that to you and 𝐷𝐻𝐻 was getting revenge? Well, I suppose that was fairly on point. Nodding slightly, I hummed with thought. I see. 𝐿𝐲𝐼𝐻 fell silent, and the starter passing by quickly. I tuned out to the general chatter of the room, focusing on one mouthful at a time so 𝐿𝐲𝐼's blue eyes would not tempt me to look. When the starter ended, the pause of mealtime made the room grow louder. Piper occasionally spoke to me, but otherwise, her thoughts occupied her so. How are things with you two? Eliza wondered. Us too? I repeated. Was there even an us to have things about? Yeah, you and Alpha? She giggled. Nothing has changed. I shrugged. I know what he is to me now, but that doesn't mean he suddenly has a right to my soul. Piper snorted from beside me and I tensed at the sound, mentally sending her evils. Okay, I get that. It's a big step, but him sleeping in your room, Eliza hinted. I rolled my eyes. He insisted. She grinned. Was it in the same bed? I sent her a look to be quiet around so many wolves, but the twinkling in her eyes told me she was getting a kick out of questioning me. Have you kissed? She grinned. Her words seemed to have caught the attention of her mate, Caleb's brown eyes darting between us. She giggled, pushing him lightly when his arm came to wrap around her chair. I flushed at the attention, which only made her grin wider, and even Caleb's lips quirked at the corners. Groaning, I turned away from them, happy to see the main meal flooding out on the trolleys. Distracted by the food, Eliza let the topic drop and I felt my shoulders relax. Serenity gave me my food and I once again thanked her before looking down at what I received. It was meat, of course, although I am not sure which type. It lay surrounded by baby potatoes, green vegetables, and a small creamy splotch of sauce. Looking at Piper, she was watching me with a lazy grin. It's venison. What's that? Dear. My eyes widened. Where did it come from? 𝐿𝐲𝐼's. She hesitated, unable to say the words out loud. He killed a load this morning and we couldn't let it go to waste. I see. And, looking back at my plate, poking my fork into the tender meat, I tentatively raised it to my mouth. It was firmer, not as tender as I expected, but it wasn't fatty. The steak I had on my plate was cut and cooked perfectly. It took little to chew the flavor, reminding me of the time I had a squirrel for dinner, slight and earthy. Swallowing, I happily dug into the rest of my meal, taking small sips of wine in between. I had learned from last time. The indulgence was not worth the embarrassment. As I ate, I found my gaze wandering. At first, it didn't stray to the forbidden end, trailing on the various pack members and servers as they scurried back into the kitchens. But of course, the temptation won over. I found Blake first, only a seat down. He fixated his dark eyes on his food. I felt my stomach churn with the knees, unable to look at him for any longer than a second. Taking a sip of my drink, I finally gave it and looked to my left. 𝐿𝐲𝐼 was sitting upright, cutlery in either hand as he chewed some food in his mouth. His eyes, however, were on me, sending my head into a tizzy. I gave him a small smile, picking my fork back up to stab some more meat. His eyes were heated with a strange emotion, watching as I placed the meat into my mouth. His pupils dilated, his hands gripping the silverware more tightly than before. Giving him another tender smile, I shied away and looked back down at my plate. Throughout the rest of the meal, I could feel his eyes on me. They hardly strayed away, burning into the side of my face as I ate. By the time we nearly finished dessert, I felt his intense 𝐾𝐿𝐲𝐼's inducing eyes lift away. Swallowing down the last of the fruit before me, I patiently waited for the cue to leave. 𝐿𝐲𝐼 stood, his chair scraping along the hard ground. He cleared his throat, thanking everyone for the meal as he stood to his full height. Adjusting his shirt, he nodded once before turning to leave. I watched him go, unable to look away as his body swayed with each movement. Just before he disappeared through the door, his head turned to me and, with a motion so small, he gestured for me to follow. 49 I lingered in the dining room longer than I should have done. 𝐻𝐲 had been gone for the rest of the meal, including when the servers came to take the dishes. By the time only a couple dozen people lingered in the dining room, I eventually turned to find Piper. She was busy talking to another man rather animatedly, and I felt bad for wanting to interrupt her. I did not know where 𝐲𝐲 went, but luckily for me, one of his henchmen still lingered. I wrung my fingers together before approaching 𝐿. His dark brown hair had recently been trimmed to rest in unruly waves to his ears. I assumed it was because of the summer that he cut the extra 2 inches off. He stood talking to a wolf, his arms crossed as he sternly nodded at the opposition. When I got close to hearing range, his brown eyes flickered to me before he raised a hand and dismissed the wolf beside him. Stopping a few feet in front of him, I spared a glance at his heated gaze. His eyes ran along my body, narrowing in on the bruising along my jaw. I watched as his jaw clenched, his ears twitching with the movement. He said nothing, merely watched me with those intense eyes. So I brushed off the intimidation and leveled my gaze with his. His eyebrow worked with interest, but I kept my face passive. "Could you please help me find 𝐲𝐲?" I asked. The eyebrow didn't drop as his eyes darted between my own. A slight nod in reply, and he dropped one of his arms to gesture for me to walk out of the room. I followed the gesture, casting a glance to see Piper watching me curiously from over the shoulder of her friend. I gave her a small smile, shrugging her questions off lazily. Once in the hallway, I slowed my pace to look up at the Delta with questioning 𝐖𝐨. "He's in the study. I was going past there. I will show you the way," Everett explained. His voice was deep, rich, with a slight accent. It complemented his looks rather wonderfully. I nodded, giving him a small thanks as he once again gestured for me to walk forward. Instead of leading the way, he stayed a step behind me, directing me with slight gestures or words down the expanse of hallways. I thought it was curious, the way he controlled the situation, but his colossal form never wavered and took over. Once outside the study, he stopped in his tracks, looking down at me expectantly. "Thank you," I murmured. He nodded once, glancing down at my throat once more before continuing down the hallway. I watched him go, my curiosity greater than ever at this silent, observant male. Turning back to the door, I held my breath as I debated what I was going to do next. My heart raced with nerves, wondering why he even wanted me to follow him. I raised and dropped my fist about 3 times before giving in and clutching my hands at my sides. Why can't I just knock? It's not like I was about to die. He just wanted to talk to me, right? Before I could debate any more, his door swung open, my eyes wide in with surprise, looking up to find his eyes filled with humor. They were deep blue, crinkled at the sides as he smirked down at me, one of his hands wrapped around the top corner of the door, the other holding onto the door frame as he loomed over me. "Are you going to come in or keep standing here like a lost lamb?" 𝐲𝐲 wondered. I swallowed ice locked in on his muscle to think any clearer. "Okay." One eyebrow raised with amusement, and he pushed away from the door frame to allow me to enter. I scurried inside his study, keeping my eyes locked ahead of me as the brush of his fingers graced my hair. The door shut softly behind me, his heavy footsteps coming to a stop behind me, causing the hairs on the nape of my neck to stand. His hand came to the middle of my back, pushing me towards a chair. I sat down in it, eager to escape the tantalizing touch of his hand. As removed around the front of me, leaning against his desk, I kept my hands clasped together in front of me, looking up at him expectantly. He smirked, crossing his arms and ankles together. Yes, I narrowed my eyes. You wanted to talk to me? Yes, dumbfounded by his lack of response. Well, what? He snickered. You sure do have a filter in that mouth of yours. Do you? I scoffed. You say I am infuriating. His grin widened, and he uncrossed his legs. I wanted to confirm with you what I said over dinner. About Blake. His grin dropped, eyes narrowing. Don't say his name. Tulip. Sucking in my lips. I nodded firmly, staying silent. He sighed, shaking his head. I did not mention you. I spoke with him about pack misconduct. Said that some members were uncomfortable with his presence. I felt my shoulders relax, my stomach settling slightly. That's great. He cocked his head, his nostrils flaring. You thought I would mention you. I shrugged. You were pretty upset. Well, of course I was, he scoffed. He hurt what is mine. My heart picked up in pace, my breath hitching with surprise. What? What is yours? His eyebrows narrowed, a rumbling growl sounding through gritted teeth. Yes, me. A pause. A hitched breath. Yes, I am yours. Yes, silence. I was speechless, but I also felt the annoyance rise in my chest. With mixed emotion, I leveled my gaze with his, straightening my spine. How can I be yours when I do not understand what is even happening? I challenged. His upper lip twitched, and he pushed away from the table to lean over me. His hands encased the arms of my chair, his shirt brushing against my forehead. I leaned backwards, my back hitting the curve of the chair, but he only leaned closer. I felt his breath in my forehead, my lips parting in surprise. If you don't understand what is happening, why do you react in such a way? He breathed, causing me to shiver. His hand left the arm of the chair, cupping my jaw softly, so I had no choice but to look at his face. I swallowed at the closeness of his face, his swirling eyes, his beautiful lips. Tell me you don't feel something from me, he murmured. My lips quivered. My hands didn't touch him. I could feel my body engulf in flames, wanting nothing more than to feel him, as though his body was the only thing that could calm the fire within. My mouth felt dry, my heart racing as his scent turned my brain to mush. I whispered you. I am confused, I admitted, shaking my head. Why flower? His thumb stroked my cheek. I don't understand what is happening anymore, I replied. You don't have to understand. He shook his head. I don't understand sometimes. I never thought I would feel this way towards. I cocked my head. A human. A species I was raised to hate. And yet, this one little human seems to weave himself into my cracks. I find myself looking for her in every room, wondering what she is doing, and I don't know why, he admitted, wincing slightly. But yet, here I am, staring into the most beautiful blue eyes I have ever seen. My heart rate quickened, my stomach churning with emotions. My chest felt heavy, unable to uphold the weight of emotion surging in my soul. My lips moved, unable to speak, unable to move from where his night sky eyes had me pinned. So, tell me, Tulip, what is it you desire from me? What did I desire? What did I desire? A part of me knew. A part of me didn't. I wanted him. I wanted his touch, his mouth, his hands, and his mind and soul. A wolf, no less. A creature so feared and fierce. I wondered what was inside. I wanted to crack him open and see beneath the hard shell of his disguise. But the other part was unsure. His increasing interest was causing my instincts to rise to the occasion. He was a beast. A monster who could kill me with one swipe of his hand. The strange sensations in my body had my adrenaline on high alert. Every time he was near, my body had a mind of its own. The electrifying buzz in my bloodstream made me lightheaded. Even his smell had my head swimming. Call it magic, drugs, or a weird mate bond. My body was at war with itself. My past relationships were nothing short of a disaster. With both my fiancé and mother. "Well, Tulip?" he asked. I licked my lips, my throat aching with the need to answer him. "I don't know." He sucked in a sharp breath. "I am giving you a vine here, Tulip." I dropped my eyes, shaking my head. I don't know what to do or say. He grimaced. "I don't understand you either." "You don't." It was my turn to frown. "I don't because I thought we were getting somewhere," he admitted, leaning away from me. "I thought you understood the mate bond." Oh God. He's going to need an answer. Anything. "Okay, I can do this." I can say something. I do. I nodded. "I just don't understand myself." He faltered in moving away, stopping upright, but still right before me. I have not had the best relationships in my life. I admitted. My motherly relationship is strained. Wolves killed my father and my sister hardly spoke to anyone. It was now or never, I thought, staring down at my lap. My fiancé was not the best of people. I continued, causing him to snarl. "Commitment is hard for me." "Why is it?" He spat through gritted teeth. I shrugged. "Well, whenever I thought I had something, someone took it away." "Like what?" "My work, my freedom, my childhood." I breathed deeply. "My free will." Sorry that you have not had it easy," he admitted. "But you are not there anymore." My nose wrinkled as I fought off tears. "Maybe not physically." He sighed, losing some of the tension in his stance as he crouched before me. His hands grabbed mine, and I jerked at the electrifying warmth. It seemed to be stronger, burning up my arms and through my chest, knocking my breath away. My eyes darted up to 𝐖𝐨𝐬𝐬 with surprise to find his expression softened. "You feel it, right?" I nodded a yes. "It grows stronger the closer we get." He smiled softly. "I see." I whispered. This mate bond truly was wonderful. There was something new every time. "You are mine, 𝐿𝐬," he growled softly, squeezing my hand. "There is no doubting the bond. It is real and you know it." I did know it. I have known it for a while now. "Well, he smirked. "What is it you desire from me?" That question again. Something so innocent, yet with so many meanings. What did I desire from him? It was simple, really. There was a lot, but only one stood out the most to me. Time. He cocked his head. "Tulip, I need time." His eyebrows furrowed, a confused frown erupting on his face. "Okay, I just need to think for a few days." "I see." He grimaced. I squeezed his hand this time. "There is a lot to take in." He sighed. "Something really has messed up our view of me. If it is Blake, then so help no. It's not Blake." I interrupted him. "It's just your mother, your fiancé who has hurt you so badly. Tulip, Let me into that head of yours, he pleaded. I swallowed, shaking my head. My mind is my own enemy. 𝐻𝐲, just give me a few days. It's a lot to take in. I had to think and come to a settlement with myself. I couldn't jump into something with this man, despite how much my body wanted him. My past was restricting me, and I needed to just think, or perhaps not think. Perhaps mind numbness was my best path. I'm going to go swim for a bit, I told him. Okay, he nodded, letting go of my hands. Okay, don't be out long. I will feel if anything is wrong. Already so different. The emotional whiplash was extreme. I just hoped he strapped me in for the ride. 50. The water was always a comfort on my shoulders, something to help guide my thoughts and calm my body. As I lay face up in the water, I watched with fascination as the sun set. This lake was something else, and every time I came out here, I found I was so close to a touch of internal peace. After the small kerfuffle with 𝐻𝐲, he had demanded that I did not close myself off. I wasn't sure what that meant, but apparently I could shut him out without even realizing. So I purposely imagined locking him in a cage and throwing away the key. He was angry at me, unable to look me in the eye as I stormed out of his office. That's what he got for telling me what to do. My thoughts slowly fizzed away until my mind calmed, and as I lay floating on the surface with the magical lake, my mind wandered to only one thing. 𝐻𝐲. I barely knew the man. I have only known he was my destined soulmate for weeks. Yet things seemed to move too fast. From him wanting me gone, to him dragging me back here and now, asking me what I desire from him. It was too much. Too soon. There was only one way I was going to have an answer, and that involved opening up. Him, of course. I needed to know him, to see what he wanted from me. Was this magical bond just a trick? Was his emotional whiplash just part of his game? I was falling for it, and I had to protect myself after Darius and my mother. I couldn't let someone else ruin what was left of me. There was only so much I could take. My heart had been broken way too many times, my father's death being the first of many hits. The scars that torture left behind can only go so far, can only cut so deep before they strike through the other side. It often felt like I was only one step, one push away from falling from a dangerous cliff, as though nature was in time with me. The wind picked up and I found myself floating towards the center of the lake. Sighing, I pulled myself from the water until I was upright, pushing my hair from my face. I backed against the wind, hoping to tie it into a bun. Splashes of water hit my shoulders, the waterfall picking up in pace with the wind. A strange feeling washed over me, a tight dread in my gut that had me holding my breath. The current of the waterfall had pulled me in and now was pushing me to the opposing side. Deciding it was getting too rough and too dark, I swam back to where my towel was, despite the sudden harshness of the water dragging me back. Walking out from the water's edge, I shook off my arms before bending to grab my towel. The wind blew across my bare back, goosebumps rising on my skin as the instinct to pause came over me. It felt like someone was here, like someone was watching me. Now, humans may have dull instincts compared to wolves, but I felt this in my soul. Pulling my towel to my chest, I scanned the dark woods surrounding me. The lake's noise hid the sound of any footsteps or critters, but the very feeling of the trees was strange, quiet, despite it being sunset. No birds were out singing, no crickets chirping or owls hooting at the approaching moon. But then there it was, beneath the roaring of the terrifying water, a rustle, a crunch of leaves and breaking of twigs. It must have been close for me to hear it because my hearing was not that of a predator. Whatever it was, had to be close or large because their footsteps. Something cut my thoughts off, barreling into my side. I shrieked at the impact, but it muffled my mouth with a large, calloused hand. Hands were on me, hushing my screams of protest. I writhed against whoever held me, their body hot and broad. I thought I could kick my way out. Being my neck was the only thing they'd pinned down, but a sharp pinch came to the base of my ear that had me jerking in surprise. Whoever held me shushed me as I slowly lost the fight of the struggle. Unwillingly, I found my limbs fall numb. Their voice was a deep timbre in my ear, attempting to reassure me that things were fine. I still tried to break free, my jerks sluggish as my head felt heavy. My knees shook, my calves aching with the weight of standing. They eventually gave out, and I slumped against the body holding me. Their hand moved from my mouth, and with the smallest amount of energy left, I attempted to shout, to scream, but my tongue was lead, heavy and numb in my mouth. I felt saliva pooling beneath my tongue as the blood rushed through my ears. Sounds and sights blurred together as things became unclear. I was tilted, kicked up into someone's arms to stare up at the blurring night sky. Voices were mumbled, but I felt the sense of urgency in their tone. There was someone else here, perhaps more than one someone. I don't know. There was too much going on. I was moving. That was for sure. Someone was carrying me somewhere. Fast, too. The wind was harsh and loud against my ears. My body littered with goosens from the lack of clothing. My eyes closed throughout all of this. The swinging, blurring trees and faces were too much to concentrate on. I barely realized we had stopped until someone grabbed my face, a hand squishing my cheeks together. I blinked, dazed at the strange face before me as I tried to settle my growing nausea. They growled, shaking my head and causing a dull headache to start in my temples. I groaned, attempting to raise a hand to slap them away, but it dropped onto my chest with defeat. My chest sighed, frustrating growing as my body and senses betrayed me. Another sharp pinch came to my throat, and with an alarmed half screech, I jerked away from the second needle. My ears rushed with sounds, the wind loud around me. I blinked, my eyes clearing more when the sight of trees came to me. There was a hand on my face again, slapping me lightly to get my attention. I swallowed my spit, feeling its wetness drying on the side of my face. I was just happy to be still again. "Can you hear me?" the person holding me asked. I grunted, blinking through the dry ears to try figure out where I knew that voice from. I still couldn't move my body, my arms and legs dead to my brain. Slowly but surely, dark eyes and dark hair came into view. I could have groaned at the glitch of it all. Finding Blake above me was something I should have expected from an evil act of kidnapping. "Where am I?" I slurred, my words incomprehensible. His thick eyebrows furrowed, his throat bobbing as he swallowed. "What?" I tried again, but my words didn't work. My voice barely audible. His lips widened into a manic grin, a booming laugh erupting in his chest as he spoke to someone in front of him. I frowned at his humor and my lack of control, wanting nothing more than to smack him in the damn face. "Stupid head." Blake jostled me, throwing me over his shoulder to stare down at the ground. The movement had my stomach lurching, and with a paltry attempt at warning him, a gag, I felt his back tense, but it was too late. Coughing, I threw a ball down his back, my head spinning as my nose and throat burned. "Fuck's sake, take her away from me," Blake snapped. Despite his words, he was the one to carry me somewhere. I grinned as I spied the vomit on his leather jacket and inside the heels of his shoes. He passed me to someone else who held me too inappropriately to be normal. Where do you want to? The sleaze asked, his hand firmly planted on my ass. In my cabin? Blake grunted. I'm going to clean my jacket and then I will be back. The male holding me nodded, his hand sliding down to grab at my upper thigh. I wanted to scream, to kick and shout at him to let go, but I couldn't. He carried me inside a wooden room before throwing me onto a firm mattress. I grunted, my back arching with pain that rolled down my spine. My head pounded fiercely, the drugs in my system too strong. I'd say stay there. Bitch. But we all know you ain't going anywhere. He laughed. I got a glimpse of the henchman before he walked out of the room, the door clicking shut behind him. I was alone. Time to move. Straining with all that I had and was. I tried so desperately hard to get my muscles to move. They ached. Heavy with exertion and like I had no control. I managed to slide my legs slightly until I was half off the bed. But my wrists couldn't take my weight and I ended up dropping onto the floor with a rather loud bang. I winced, knowing it was bound to have alerted someone to my mishap. And I was correct when Blake himself walked into the room. His jacket and boots were gone, leaving him in only a polo shirt and jeans. I narrowed my eyes as he approached, desperately trying to grip onto the side table by my head. Oh, I wouldn't bother. We have injected you with a paralyzing venom. It's only temporary. Of course. A concoction made for fun little things. He taunted. I wanted to scream at him, to demand him to let me go. I wanted to know where I was, why I was here, and what he wanted from me. I can tell you have many questions, but the time for conversation is later. Dear human, he smirked, pulling me from the floor. I weakly protested, smacking his hands that lay on my hips. He rolled his eyes, throwing me onto the mattress. Now I was only supposed to bring you here and ready for your transfer. But he hummed. I wanted to ask what the hell he was talking about, but a cold wash of dread ran down my spine at the sight of a knife. My heart raced, fear paralyzing me to the core. I felt my body shaking, legs desperately trying to kick at something, anything, to get him off of me. I dug my nails into his forearm, trying to pry his fingers from my skin. It only infuriated him, sending a sharp smack to my temple that had my headache grow. I groaned weakly, my vision swirling, mind falling to haze. I didn't want to pass out. I couldn't pass out when this was happening to me. I needed to escape, but my body betrayed me, my head swimming with the need to succumb despite how much I fought it. He had drugged me. I was nothing. I felt my mind do its usual tricks succumb to the trauma. My emotions slowly turned themselves off, body falling as numb as my mind. It wasn't the first time used to the torment. It was better to give in than fight it when I didn't stand a chance. Tears fell from my eyes, my heart arching with every piece of my body. Adrenaline pulsed through my veins, fear forcing my heart into its cage. A hand wrapped around my throat, pushing on my airways until I was lacking precious air. I welcomed the pain, welcomed the dark spots in my vision that would take me away from this cruel reality. I didn't want to be here anymore. With a strangled gasp, I fell deep into the nightmares, only wishing for someone to help me.